Now for more on this, Gordon Chang joins me now here in the studio. So he is the author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, knows much about this region. We appreciate you coming on, lending your expertise. You just heard Kim Jong Un basically saying that his country is nearing its goal of, quote, equilibrium in military force with the U.S. It's sad to say that that potentially could be a good sign, as Greg Palcott just showed in his report. What does that mean when he says equilibrium? What does he mean?
I think what he really means is deterrence, that he will be able to deter the United States, because obviously he's not going to get an arsenal as large as ours, at least not in the foreseeable future. Now, if all he wanted was equilibrium, maybe we could live with him, but unfortunately that won't happen, because the core goal of the Kim regime, and really this is the basis of its legitimacy, is to take over South Korea. So we got to be worried that once he's confident in his arsenal, Kim is going to try to use it to blackmail the United States. He wants us to break the treaty with South Korea, get our troops off the peninsula, so that he can then intimidate Seoul and basically absorb it.
Okay, and Seoul is not going to be intimidated, and the president there has made it very clear, and the United States military is behind them 100%. Yesterday, General H.R. McMaster held a news conference at the White House, basically saying that there is immense international pressure on the denuclearization of North Korea. McMaster, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, both pointing out that North Korea is further isolating itself from the rest of the world by conducting these tests. What about further isolation with, let's say, China and Russia agreeing to the toughest UN sanctions ever? Would that actually lead to any resolution here?
Well, those sanctions that were adopted on the Monday, which is Resolution 2375, yes, they were the strictest of the 9 set of sanctions, but they're certainly not strict enough. And the real problem is enforcement, because we know that China has busted the first 7 set of sanctions. It's probably going to ignore the 8th, which were adopted on August 5. And then clearly, the last one, they're built really to be defeated by non-enforcement, because they're just not enforceable with the mechanisms in place. So we got to really be concerned that China's not going to help. We got to also remember that the Chinese have been fueling this crisis by giving the North Koreans very critical equipment for their ballistic missile program. And indeed, North Korea's most advanced missiles look to be variants of China's. And we need to ask the Chinese, how come the North Koreans have Chinese-looking missiles? How
would Japan then have to reevaluate its missile defense system?
They're buying more missile defense systems from the United States. They're going to buy Aegis Ashore. Those are the systems we have on our destroyers, but there's also a land variant of them. They're going to buy that. And I think that they're probably also going to bolster their other missile defense systems that they purchase from us. So they've got to do that. But also, missile defense here is not going to be the answer. It's going to be stopping Kim Jong Un.
Then explain to us what a rearmed Japan would mean for North Korea and China.
Well, a rearmed Japan, and they're doing that anyway because the Chinese are threatening their islands in the East China Sea, and indeed, China is expanding its territorial claims, it appears, to want to take Okinawa and the rest of the Ryukyu chain, because state media has been making that claim. So I think that essentially what we're going to see is Japan become a much better partner for the United States, but it's not really going to be there in the time frame that we need, because this crisis is going to occur pretty soon.
Yeah, no, there is no time to waste. Every single day, it is really, truly like a ticking bomb. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday in that news conference also made mention that President Trump will be meeting with South Korean leaders on the heels of North Korea launching another missile on Thursday. Now, considering just how unstable Kim Jong Un is and his threats against these tougher sanctions, is South Korea's firing missiles back at them just the beginning?
Well, it is just the beginning, and the North Koreans aren't really impressed with that.
No. One of them failed.
Well, one of them failed, but also, even if all of them succeeded, and there have been times when the South Koreans have fired missiles and all of them have worked. The North Koreans aren't stopped by this. They only look at the South Koreans as puppets of the United States. And
they look at them as a joke, whether the United States is involved or not. And that's the problem, because they don't take these missile launches seriously, whether they are successful or not, which means they don't take the United States military very seriously, because we are in South Korea there as well. Why don't they take the United States military more seriously, and what do we need to do to make them believe that we are a military power, the most powerful in the world, that needs to be taken seriously.
Well, in 1968, they grabbed the Pueblo out of international water. 1 killed. The year following that, they shot down an EC-121, 31 Americans dead. We didn't do anything. So although they know that we have a much more capable military than they do, they also think we don't have any political will, and they haven't seen very much pushback from succeeding administrations. So they don't really think that we're going to do anything to them. And by the way, Julie, that's the way the Chinese think about us as well.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we need to send a very strong message to China because they have been basically allowed to continue to allow this to continue. I mean, we wouldn't be in this position had China stepped up to the plate many years ago. And now look at where the technology is in North Korea. They probably wouldn't be so equipped as they are. Now they're ready to arm an ICBM with a hydrogen bomb. Some experts are saying they'll have that in 6 months. And it seems that U.S. intelligence even were caught by surprise, right, at how advanced their technology is. So then what do we do to stop that? And what happens if South Korea goes nuclear?
Yeah, well, one of the things we've got to do is impose costs on Chinese banks for money laundering for the North Koreans.
Yeah.
You know, we've allowed China to supply all this technology, and it's not just for the ballistic missile program, it's also for the nuclear weapons program in North Korea. And you know, American administrations, you know, in and out have just allowed this to continue. We've got to stop it, which means we need to start looking at these North Korean ships that are sending missiles to Iran and chemical weapons to Syria. We need to inspect this stuff as we're proposing to do, and the UN won't let us. But we have the authority to do that because the North Koreans abrogated the 1953 armistice that ended the Korean War. So really, there is no agreement not to use force, which means we can stop these ships, board them, and confiscate the weapons that North Korea is sending around the world.
Fascinating. All right, Gordon Chang, thank you so much.
Thanks, Julie.